right, it's great to have you with us again, either this morning or this afternoon or this evening, whatever it is. We're going to continue in our study in Matthew chapter 5, so if you want to get a Bible and find your way to Matthew chapter 5. In the meantime, while you're doing that, I want to remind you that we do have a website to visit, and it is factoryvillebiblechurch.com. And if you visit that website, we're constantly updating it, trying to do daily, trying to add a devotional, updating prayer requests, and as we have sermons or little messages to put on there, we're going to try to do that. So please take a look at it from time to time. Also, we're going to be trying to communicate more with you along the lines of emails, so please look for those, and feel free to respond to those with prayer requests or any needs that you might have, and that would be very beneficial to us if you could do that. Our message this morning is actually the second part of the one in regards to thou shalt not commit adultery. That's in Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse number 27. Again, Jesus is in a place where he's talking about how it's impossible to keep the law, because it's not just the laws, it's not just the commandments that were given, but it's the intent behind the commandments that are given. And again, verse number 27 of chapter 5 says, "You have heard that it hath been said by them of old time, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. If thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out, cast it from thee. And for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and that not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that the whole body should be cast into hell. It has been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causes her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced, commits adultery." Those two things together all come under this same category of, thou shalt not commit adultery. And again, you see the authority of Jesus behind things when he said, "You've heard that it hath been said of old," and that is the commandments, that's God's commandments, all the way back to the 10 commandments. It says, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." That, of course, is commandment number 7. And he says, "But I say unto you, whosoever shall look upon a woman to lust after her, hath committed adultery with her already in his heart." And so again, you see Jesus' authority as he speaks of, this is what the law is, but God's intent is not even to look on a woman to lust after her. And again, it's to look with intent, it's to look with the purpose of feeding sexual appetites. Again, if you look at verse number 28, it says, "Whosoever looketh on a woman to lust," or in order to lust, or in order to feed this. And again, we talked about the idea of lust is what can I get? What is in it for me? It's a selfish desire. And again, the difference between love and lust. Love is what can I give? How can I help the other person? How can I give of myself for that other person's benefit? Lust is what can I get in return? And here again, this is looking for the intention to get something in return, looking to lust. And that is a heart problem, and there's no question about that. Lusting is a matter of not just the eye and looking, but it is a matter of the heart as well. And so in verse number 28, we see what causes this problem of adultery. Well, what causes the problem of adultery is the looking to lust. And then it's feeding that problem because it talks about the idea that you've sort of lost control. It talks about, "If thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out, cast it from thee." And then in verse 30, "If thy right hand offend thee, cut it off, cast it from thee as well." And it's like, if you cannot control your eye, if you cannot control your hand, this causes a problem. You have looking to lust is a heart problem, and then you have the problem of I cannot control my eye, I cannot control my hand. And we need to be on guard against these things. These two main offenders are the eye and the hand. And literally, these verses talk about showing restraint or getting these problems under control. If there's a heart problem, it's probably because the eye has offended, and the eye plus a heart problem equals sin. Hand plus a heart problem equals sin. And so I want to emphasize in the next few minutes this idea of how serious this is, and how one thing leads to another, and how the eye and the hand are the two things that lead someone to commit adultery or lead someone astray from the relationship that they should have. It's kind of interesting that when Paul writes to the Corinthians, he's writing to correct a lot of the errors in the church. And in chapter 7, he spends a lot of time talking about sexual sins. And it is interesting that the very, very first verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 is the following. It says, "Now concerning the things whereof you wrote to me, it's good for a man not to touch a woman." And if you take that all by itself, it sounds, it's like, it sounds very constraining. It says you shouldn't even touch her. And then of course people go, well, what about holding hands, and what about this, and what about that? But what Paul is trying to emphasize is that the touch is what leads to other things. It starts with this. And he says it's not good for a man to touch a woman. Why? Because he can't stop, and the addicting factor is what kicks in. And so again, we look back at the passage in Matthew chapter 5 where it says, "If thy right eye offend you." The word offend in the Greek is the word scandalizo. And of course it doesn't take much to figure out, look at the word, and it's if my right eye causes a scandal. It's causing a problem. And the same word, of course, is used if your right hand offend you. This word is if the right eye and my right hand cause a scandal. Now again, it doesn't mean, okay, it's okay to do it with your left eye or your left hand. It's simply pointing out the fact that typically your right eye is the main eye of focus, the right hand is the typical thing. So it's basically tell you any hand, any eye, it's like whichever way you would do this. And again, it's not talking about mutilation of the physical body. It's not talking about, well, we need to pluck our eye out and we need to cut our hand off. Matter of fact, there are many scriptures in the Old Testament literally talk against this kind of thing. Any kind of mutilation is the word, thank you. Any kind of self-mutilation is frowned upon as far as the Old Testament is concerned, and God is not in favor of that. So he's not talking about cutting your eye out or cutting your hand off. He's talking about heart surgery, or he's talking about spiritual surgery, getting control of the eye, getting control of the hand. How serious is this? Well, I want to share with you a few verses from the book of Proverbs. And matter of fact, there's a lot of verses, especially if you go to Proverbs. This is wisdom literature written by Solomon. And chapter 5, chapter 6, and chapter 7 all have long passages that deal with this subject of adultery and relationship type advice. And so it starts out in Proverbs chapter 5, and you can certainly look and follow the verses here that are on the screen for you. It starts out in chapter 5 where Solomon writes, "For the lips of a strange woman drop as a honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword." What appears to be something that's good, honeycomb and smooth, and it's desirable, and this is wonderful. He says, no. This is a trap. The end is bitter. And it leads to the fact that her feet go down to death. Her steps take hold on hell. This is not the route you want to take. This is not the way you want to go. "Lest thou shouldest ponder the path of life, her ways are movable, that thou canst not know them." And of course the temptations change from time to time. And the devil, of course, is smart in regards to this matter and how he lures you to death and to hell and to defeat. "Listen," is what Solomon says, "Hear now me, therefore, O children, depart not from the words of my mouth." It's important that you listen to this instruction. Get far away from this person. Remove thy way from her. Come not near the door of her house. Remove, come not near, get away. The classic Bible example of this is the story of Joseph and Potiphar's wife. We could look at that passage in Genesis where it talks about the fact that she literally tried to seduce him. She did everything in her power to get him to commit an adulterous relationship with her. He finally says, "I cannot do this and sin against my master." He said, "I cannot do this great wickedness and sin against God." She clears out the house of all the servants. She makes everything ready. She says, "No one will find out." Finally, he says, I've got to get out of here. And he literally flees, and she grabs him and takes his coat off of him as he flees to get away from this temptation. This is the plan, and this is what Solomon says, the best thing to do is run, remove, come not near. And the strategy changes. She even says, well, we don't have to do anything wrong. Just come and lie next to me. And Joseph is smart enough to get out. Again, in Proverbs, as we continue, lest thou give thy honor unto others and thy years to the cruel. What happens is, if you practice this, adultery, you're going to be the one who ends up losing out. Strangers will be filled with thy wealth, and thy labor shall be in the house of a stranger. You end up divorcing your wife and taking on another wife. I think that's called, and you end up paying alimony. Your wealth, your treasures end up in somebody else's pocket. That's what happens. You will be the one who mourns at the last when thy flesh and thy body are consumed. This does not go well for you. And what we'll say, I've made a mistake because I hated God's instruction. My heart despised rebuke. I wouldn't listen. I should have listened. And this is kind of like the later you will kick yourself and you're like, why did I do this? And how did I get in such a mess? I've not obeyed the voice of my teachers nor inclined my ears to them that instructed me. So Solomon again is saying it's important to listen and pay attention. Follow this instruction so these consequences will not happen. Well, it says, let thy fountain be blessed. Rejoice with the wife of thy youth. Let her be as the loving hind in the pleasant roe. Let her breast satisfy thee at all times, and be thou ravished always with her love. And again, you can see here, again, he's pointing to the fact that this is a person who already has a person. And he talks about your wife, and be satisfied with your wife. Do not be led astray, either by your eye or hand, to follow after someone else. And you see even the word satisfy in verse number 18. You need to be satisfied with what you have. Verse number 20. And why wilt thou, my son, be ravished with a strange woman and embrace the bosom of a stranger? For the ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he pondereth all his goings. You cannot do this without God knowing and God being aware. And it's kind of interesting. As your eye wanders, God's eye is watching what's going on. Now, chapter 6 of Proverbs gives us some more verses along this same idea and some more instruction. Starting in verse number 23. Again, God's commandment is a lamp, and the law is a light, and reproofs of instructions are the way of life. So this is important for living. And the design for the law is to keep you from the evil woman. Keep you from the flattery of the tongue of a strange woman. She will say those things that will draw you in. And so beware of the speech and the flattery, hearing what you want to hear. Lust, there's that word again, not after her beauty, in your heart. And again, here's the matter of lust in your heart. Adultery of the heart. Neither let her take thee with her eyelids, for by means of a whorewoman a man is brought to a piece of bread. The adulteress will hunt for the precious life. Again, you are going to be the loser in this endeavor. Can a man take fire into his bosom and his clothes be not burned? Can one go on hot coals and his feet not be burned? The answer to both of these is no. It's going to cost you. He that goeth into his neighbor's wife, whoever touches her shall not be innocent. There's the touch part again. You're not without guilt. You're not without responsibility. Logic says if men do not despise a thief, if I'm stealing something because to satisfy my soul when I'm hungry, people get that. They understand this. And if you're caught stealing, you're found, you have to restore sevenfold and give all that substance of his house. However, if you commit adultery with a woman, you lack understanding. He that doeth it destroys his own soul. This is not a need. This is not something you have to have. This is not necessary for life. A wound dishonor shall he get, and his reproach shall not be wiped away. Again, the consequence is great, and you cannot do this without consequence. What happens is you try to steal somebody else's wife or vice versa. Jealousy is the rage of a man, therefore he will not spare in the day of vengeance. He will not regard any ransom, neither will he rest content, though thou givest many gifts. And so, again, one of the reasons for thou shalt not commit adultery is even that is going to lead to murder, and thou shalt not kill. Proverbs 7 continues. And the fact, again, that there's so many verses in Proverbs 5, 6, and 7 on this one particular subject means it is a big, big deal. My son, verse 1 of Proverbs 7, my son, keep my words and lay up my commandments with thee. Keep my commandments and live. It's, again, in your best interest to obey. You will live longer this way. and my law is the apple of thine eye. Bind them upon thy fingers, write them upon the tables of your heart. Say unto wisdom, thou art my sister, and call understanding thy kinswoman, that they may keep you from the strange woman and the stranger that flattereth with their lips. Again, the idea is to watch out for her flattery, watch out for the folly. For at the window of my house I looked through my casement, and I beheld among the simple ones, this is one who's not very bright, who doesn't have all the information he should, I discerned among the youths a young man void of understanding. He calls him simple because he doesn't have all the information, young because he's not experienced. While passing through the street near a corner, and he went the way to her house. He's in the wrong place. In the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night. Men love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. And behold, there met him a woman with the attire of a harlot and subtle of heart. She's loud and stubborn. The word loud is more forceful. She's doesn't back off. Her feet abide not in her house. She's in everybody else's house. Now is she outside, now in the streets, and lieth in wait at every corner. So she caught him and kissed him, and with an impudent face said unto him, I have peace offerings with me. This day have I paid my vows. Therefore came I forth to meet thee, diligently to seek thy face, and I have found thee. I have decked my bed with coverings of tapestry, and carved works and fine linen of Egypt. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love until the morning. Let us solace ourselves with loves. She has set the stage for all this stuff, and she lies in wait. She set the stage. We're not going to get caught. Come, let us take our fill of love, for the good man is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. There's not going to be any consequences. We can't get caught. He's taken a bag of money. I know he's going to be gone for a number of days. He'll come home at an appointed time sometime in the future. Well, with her much fair speech, she caused him to yield. With the flattering of the lips, she forced him. He goeth after her, blindly, as an ox goeth to the slaughter, as a fool to the correction of the stocks. He's again headed for trouble. This is just going to, till the dart strike through his liver. As a bird hasteneth to the snare, and knoweth not that it is for his life. This is doom. The trap has been set. Hearken unto me now, therefore, O ye children, attend to the words of my mouth. Let not your heart decline to her ways. Go not astray in her paths. For she's cast down many. There's many wounded. Yea, many strong men have been slain by her. This is a temptation the devil uses very, very often. It has cast down many to the slaughter. Her house is the way to hell, going down to the chambers of death. And again, the warning here over and over again, this is serious stuff. It is not something that you should mess with. If your eye is wandering and your hand touches and this causes your heart to commit adultery, you are giving place to the devil. You are leading things down the wrong way. Some of you may remember in 2009, there's a story about Steve McNair, who was a pro football quarterback, super college athlete, Heisman Trophy finalist, quarterback for the Tennessee Titans, and football star who was shot by a woman. And the woman he was shot by, he was cheating on his wife with this woman. But this woman shot him because she thought he was cheating with somebody else. And she shot him, then shot herself. And this is how this leads. And it's like this, it leads to death, it leads to problems, it leads to difficulties. And our newspapers and our everything, the television media is filled with this kind of thing. Why these things result? Because of relationships that have gone awry. The eye is often the instrument of ensnaring the heart. It is interesting. We're going to look at a passage from Job in just a minute, but Job talks about making a covenant with your eyes. And it has to do with this idea: turn away from beholding that which may tend to excite impure thoughts. And again, when it talks about your right eye offend you, and it says pluck it out, do not allow your eye to do this. Turn away from beholding that which may tend to excite impure thoughts. Deny yourself the gratification of seeing or feeding the eyes with things that will appeal to the flesh. The idea of cut off, it's like pretend it's not there. Your eye doesn't see this. Take a blind eye towards this. Do not feed your eye in this kind of subject matter. It's better to lose all your carnal pleasures Better to lose the pleasure of the eye and the pleasure of the touch than to expose your whole body and soul to hell. And so this idea of removing or casting from you, casting this eye, is talking about what I might want to look at as pleasurable. Cut that off, cast that aside, because it's going to lead to something else. There's an interesting passage in Job where Job is proclaiming his innocence before God. He doesn't understand why these things have happened to him. He said, I've not done anything. And in proclaiming his innocence in Job 31, he says this. He says, I know I haven't sinned because I made an agreement with my eyes. I made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? He says, I'm not going to commit adultery. I've not committed any kind of sexual sin. I made an agreement with my eyes that I'm not going to do this. For what portion of God is there from above, and what inheritance of the Almighty is from on high? Is not destruction to the wicked, and a strange punishment to the workers of iniquity? Doth not he see my ways and count all my steps? Job says, I made a covenant with my eyes that I would not do the wrong thing, that I would not see the wrong thing. And that way I can't sin in this adultery. I haven't cheated on my wife. I haven't cheated with anybody else. I made a covenant with my eyes because God sees all. He sees my ways. He counts my steps. He knows all these things. A little bit further in the chapter, he says, if my step had turned out of the way and my heart had walked after my eyes. He talks about the fact that if I had done the wrong thing, that would have been because my heart was following my eyes. But I made a covenant with my eyes to do what was right. And so this passage that talks about removing your eye, removing your hand, it's talking about removing from self-pleasure so that you can keep yourself from committing adultery of the heart. Now the passage continues in verse number 31. That says, it hath been said, whosoever shall put away his wife shall give her a writing of divorcement. And it says, but I say to thee, whosoever shall put away his wife, save for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced commits adultery. So this is continuing the adultery theme. And again, it's talking about when you look and you lust, well, what happens? Well, when you look and lust, you become discontent, and now I have to think about replacing my wife. I've looked, I've lusted, I've seen, I've touched. I now want something different. I'm discontent. I want to replace her. I don't want her anymore. It literally says, do not put her away or release her unless it's fornication. Now, if she has found someone else, give her a bill of divorcement, and then that man has committed adultery. And so he talks here about a writing of divorcement. And in verse number 31, whosoever shall put away his wife, let her give her a writing of divorcement. But he's putting her away because she has committed some kind of sexual sin, and her and this man have both committed adultery. If you put her away, this writing of divorcement, if you put her away so you can marry someone else, now you and your new mate have committed adultery. Now again, what this is talking about and what Jesus is emphasizing is even if nothing has happened, even if you have not acted on this heart's desire, but this desire to maybe put my wife away or to get rid of my husband so I can move on to someone else, this is adultery of the heart. Whether any sexual acts have been consummated or not, it's still adultery of the heart. Deuteronomy chapter 24 talks about this writing of divorcement just a little further. We'll quickly go through this. It says, when a man hath taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that she find no favor in his eyes, because he hath found some uncleanness in her, let him give her a bill of divorcement, and give it into her hand, and send her out of his house. This idea, again, speaks of uncleanness found in her. It's not just that she's not a very good cook, or the word uncleanness is literally translated nakedness. So it's not just a flaw in character. I found her to be unfaithful. I found her to be not a virgin. And maybe even she wants out. And so he says, I want you to write her, give her, and send her out. Write her a bill of divorcement, give it to her, send her out. There's something in her moral character that this man, for whatever reason, cannot forgive or cannot live with. Talks about when she is departed out of your house, then she may go and be married be another man's wife. So permission now is given to her to be another man's wife. First husband has relinquished all rights to her. Now, this information and where we're leading here is actually a message to the first man. I am the husband. My wife has been somewhat unfaithful. I find she's involved with some kind of sexual activity that is not right or not pleasing to me. I'm going to divorce her. The next few verses are basically written so that the man, think about this before you do it, okay? Think about what you're about to do, because once you do this, once you give her a writing of divorcement, she's now free to marry somebody else. Well, you possibly exist that you're going to lose her forever. Verse number 3, if the latter husband, if she gets married again, and he doesn't like her for some reason, and he gives her a writing of divorcement, and he gives it into her hand, or and is sent out of her house, or the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife, her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife. After that she is defiled, for this is an abomination before the Lord, and thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance. So what he says here, if the second marriage ends in divorce or by death, she can't come back to the first guy. So again, the message to the first husband is, listen, your wife has, this is almost like the story in the Minor Prophets of Hosea and Gomer. Hosea is told to find Gomer, take her back, and to forgive her and to love her as if she's not been unfaithful. Because the warning is here is if you do divorce her because she's been unfaithful, or you do divorce her because of adultery, and she marries another, she is gone to you for good. So you need to think this one through. Maybe you can find room for forgiveness. Maybe you can find a way of reconciliation. This allows the wife to be remarried and taken care of by someone else. And it causes the first husband to think carefully about his this matter of divorce. It's a message to him, understanding that if she marries again, she's lost to him forever. And so even with this matter of adultery, it's like one thing leads to another. Mark chapter 10 and Matthew chapter 19 again talks about this idea. And again, what is stressed in both those passages is if a man divorces in order to marry another, if a woman divorces in order to marry another, that is adultery. Whether adultery was committed before or not, it's adultery of the heart. It's a sin that starts with the eyes and the hands and then eventually proceeds to the heart.